Binghamton University, spring 2018. For thousands of students, it's a season of anticipation. Finals are approaching, and for seniors, the real world is just a diploma away. For 22-year-old Haley Anderson, a nursing student from Long Island, the future wasn't just bright, it had a purpose. She was compassionate, dedicated, and weeks away from achieving her dream of becoming a nurse to her friends and family. Haley was a light, the kind of person who lit up a room and worked tirelessly toward her goal of helping others. But beneath this picture of collegiate promise, Haley was entangled in a relationship that was far more complex and far darker than anyone on the outside could see. That relationship was with Orlando Tercero, another 22-year-old nursing student. On the surface, they were peers. But their romantic history was a volatile cycle of on-again, off-again connection. And there were clear, documented warning signs. In 2017, Haley's tires were slashed. She suspected Tercero. Police were called, but Haley, perhaps hoping to de-escalate or move on, chose not to press charges. It was a decision that would later haunt those who loved her. That incident established a pattern, a red flag of controlling and jealous behavior that was noted, but not acted upon with the force it may have required. It was a quiet footnote in a relationship that refused to end cleanly, a hidden fracture in Haley Anderson's world of promise. As March 2018 arrived, Haley was focused on her future. But on the cold night of March 8th, she would make a decision to visit Orlando Tercero's off-campus apartment. Surveillance cameras would capture her walking inside. They would capture something else. Something that would turn a story of collegiate promise into a desperate international manhunt. March 8, 2018. The night air in Binghamton held the last chill of winter. In an off-campus apartment on Murray Street, Orlando Tercero was home. And in the early morning hours, just after 1 a.m., Haley Anderson arrived. This moment, captured by a building's surveillance camera, is the last confirmed sighting of Haley Anderson alive. What happened inside apartment number 6 in the hours that followed is known only to one living person. But the digital clock of the modern world was ticking, silently recording the passage of time. Nearly 5 hours later, the door opens again. A single figure emerges, Orlando Tercero. He is alone. He carries a backpack, walks with purpose, and never looks back at the apartment door closing behind him. The contrast between the two recordings is stark and chilling. Haley entered. She did not leave. Tercero proceeded with his Thursday with an unsettling normality. He went to class. He spoke to acquaintances. But his actions suggest a mind already focused on a plan that required distance, and relied on a specific legal loophole tied to his passport. By that evening, as friends would begin to text to Haley who would never respond, Orlando Tercero was not in Binghamton. He was at an airport, presenting a document that held the key to his escape, his Nicaraguan citizenship. He boarded a flight, putting an ocean and a formidable legal shield between himself and the silent apartment on Murray Street. But he underestimated two things: the loyalty of Haley's friends and the very technology that defines our age. Friday, March 9th. Haley Anderson had now been out of contact for over a full day. For her close-knit group of friends and roommates, this wasn't just unusual, it was a deafening alarm. In our hyper-connected world, silence is more disturbing than noise. And when your friend isn't just any student, but a responsible, communicative nursing student weeks from graduation, that silence screams that something is terribly wrong. They retraced her last known steps. They called everyone she knew. Nothing. Then, they remembered a modern tool of casual safety, one that would transform from a convenience into a critical forensic instrument. They opened this Find My Friends app. Haley, like many friends, had shared her location with them. The location wasn't at a library, a cafe, or another friend's dorm. It was stationary, for hours, at Orlando Tercero's apartment. The same apartment she'd entered the night before. The same ex-boyfriend with a history of volatility. Every instinct and every scary story they'd ever heard must have raced through their minds. They faced a terrible choice. Call the police and risk overreacting, or go check themselves and risk walking into a situation they couldn't handle. Driven by a desperate need to help their friend, they chose to go. They drove to Murray Street. They approached the apartment. The door was slightly ajar. They called Haley's name. Only silence answered. And in that silence, they made a decision that would change everything. They pushed the door open. The door was unlocked. They called Haley's name. No answer. The apartment was quiet, tidy, but felt profoundly empty. With each step inside, the weight of dread grew heavier. This wasn't a social visit anymore. It was a search for a missing friend in the home of the last person to see her alive. Every instinct must have screamed to turn back, to call for help from outside. But the thought of Haley being hurt, needing them, propelled them forward. The blue dot on their phone was here, in this room. They reached for the bedroom door. 911 operator call says. Hi, it's 911. What's your emergency? Caller says, our friend. We found our friend. She's in an apartment. She's not breathing. I think she's dead. Please hurry. Haley Anderson was found on Orlando Tercero's bed. The scene that greeted first responders was one of profound tragedy. The vibrant, aspiring nurse they would soon identify had been killed by manual strangulation asphyxiation caused by neck compression. It was a deeply personal, violent act. There was no gun, no knife. The only weapon was a pair of hands. As Binghamton police sealed the apartment as a homicide scene, two immediate realizations struck them. First, the primary suspect, Orlando Tercero, was conspicuously absent. Second, the scene before them told a confusing story. Alongside the evidence of a murder, detectives found what appeared to be the staged elements of a suicide, a handwritten note and pills. Had they just walked into a tragedy or a carefully constructed lie? The Binghamton Police Department's Detective Division, led by Captain John Chapman, now faced a scene with two competing narratives. The first was a clear homicide, a young woman manually strangled. The second, however, was a puzzling tableau of self-destruction. A handwritten note in Spanish, placed prominently, read as an apology. Nearby, a bottle of pills suggested an intention. To a first glance, it could look like a scene of remorse, a person taking their own life after a terrible act. But seasoned investigators began to see the cracks in the story. Detectives said the note was there. The pills were there. But the medical examiner was clear. Cause of death was homicidal strangulation. The pills hadn't been ingested. This wasn't a suicide. It was a performance. The evidence suggested a deliberate attempt to muddy the waters, to perhaps make the scene look like a murder-suicide that had only been half completed, a frantic, remorseful act instead of a cold, premeditated one. But the forensics didn't lie. This was a staging, a fabrication meant to misdirect the initial investigation and buy the most critical commodity, time. And time was exactly what the prime suspect had gained. While detectives were still processing the scene on Murray Street, their suspect wasn't in New York or even in the United States. He was thousands of miles away, having used his dual citizenship as a shield. The investigation had just begun, and it was already slamming into an international barrier. Nicaragua has a firm, non-negotiable policy. It does not extradite its own citizens. For the Broome County District Attorney's Office, this meant that gathering evidence of a crime in New York was only half the battle. The other half would be a diplomatic and legal fight across borders. Orlando Tercero had chosen his destination carefully. But could a foreign country become the unlikely venue for American justice? Orlando Tercero's head start was substantial. While Haley's friends were growing concerned on Friday, he was already airborne. His path was deliberate. A flight from Binghamton to Miami, then a connection to Managua, the capital of Nicaragua. He wasn't just fleeing the scene. He was fleeing the entire United States justice system. Steve Cornwell said, "We are actively working with our federal and international partners. We know where he is. The challenge is not finding him. The challenge is getting him back to face justice in Broome County." This was the formidable wall Tercero had placed between himself and American law. Extradition was off the table. This left authorities with only one untested path: cooperation. They needed the Nicaraguan government to agree to arrest and prosecute Tercero themselves under their own laws for a crime committed on American soil through diplomatic channels. And with assistance from the U.S. Department of State and the FBI, an agreement was reached. Nicaraguan authorities, acting on the evidence provided by Binghamton police, would locate and apprehend Tercero on their own soil. The manhunt was now an international collaboration. Within days of the murder, Nicaraguan police tracked Orlando Tercero down. He was arrested without incident in Managua. For Haley's family, it was a moment of grim relief he was in custody. But that custody was in a prison cell in Central America. The question now shifted from pursuit to process. How do you try an American murder case in a Nicaraguan courtroom? The answer would involve a historic, emotionally wrenching, and technologically unprecedented trial. November 2019. Nearly 20 months after the murder, a trial began in a venue no one had anticipated. In a Nicaraguan courtroom, under Nicaraguan law, Orlando Tercero faced charges of femicide, the killing of a woman based on her gender. But the victim was American. The evidence was all in New York, and the prosecutors were 2,500 miles away. This was the unprecedented compromise, a bicontinental trial. The Broome County District Attorney's Office would present its entire case via video link. Every piece of evidence, every witness's testimony, would have to be transmitted through this fragile digital bridge. The challenges were immense. Time zone delays. Language translation for every word spoken. The surreal disconnect of presenting testimony about a friend's murder or a daughter's last moments to a laptop camera. Could the gravity of the crime, the weight of the loss, possibly transmit through a screen? Prosecutor said, "You Honor, the defendant left this note, expressing remorse. But he left it next to a bottle of pills he never took, in an apartment where he staged a scene after he strangled Haley Anderson. This isn't remorse. It's theater." For days, the digital trial proceeded. The security footage of Haley entering and Tercero leaving alone was displayed on the Nicaraguan courtroom wall. Medical testimony detailed the violence of manual strangulation. But the most powerful moments were yet to come. The court would now hear from Haley Anderson's family. They would deliver their victim impact statements not to the defendant in the room, but to his pixelated image on a screen. Could justice truly be served through a video call? The most poignant testimony in any murder trial comes not from experts, but from the survivors. For Haley Anderson's family, the chance to address the court and the man who killed their daughter was a moment they had waited nearly 2 years for. But they would do so separated by an ocean and a screen. Frank Anderson said, "You took a light from this world. You took a future nurse who wanted to help people. You took my daughter. You didn't just take her life that night. You took every holiday, every future achievement, every laugh we would ever share. There is no sentence in any country that gives her back to us." One by one, Haley's loved ones delivered their statements to the pixelated image of Orlando Tercero. They spoke of her compassion, her dreams, a devastating void her absence created. They spoke of the betrayal of trust, the horror of the crime scene details, and the added agony of his flight. The digital format couldn't diminish the raw power of their words. After the emotional testimony, the legal proceedings concluded. The evidence was all before the court. The digital footprint from the Find My Friends app, the damning surveillance timeline, the forensic proof of strangulation, the staged suicide note, and the testimony of a heartbroken family. The case now rested in the hands of a single Nicaraguan judge. There would be no American-style jury deliberation for days. The judge retired to consider her verdict. For Haley's family, who had endured the bizarre and painful process of a video-linked trial, the wait was almost over. But would a conviction in a foreign court, under foreign laws, feel like justice? Or would it forever feel like a distant, hollow echo of the tragedy that began in a Binghamton apartment? November 1st, 2019, the judge was ready to deliver the verdict. For the family of Haley Anderson, this moment represented the end of an agonizing, unconventional journey for accountability. The decision would come not from a jury of peers, but from a single jurist in a country thousands of miles away. Judge said, in the case against Orlando Tercero Moreno for the crime of femicide, this court finds the defendant culpable, guilty. The judge sentenced Orlando Tercero to 30 years in a Nicaraguan prison. Under Nicaraguan law, the sentence could be subject to reduction. For taking the life of Haley Anderson, he would likely spend decades behind bars, but he would serve that time in his home country, not in the United States. Frank Anderson said, "It doesn't bring Haley back. It will never bring Haley back. But it's a verdict that says what he did was legally and morally wrong. That he is responsible. We have to live with our life sentence of missing her. Now he has to live with his." The legal battle was over. Orlando Tercero was convicted. But the story of Haley Anderson doesn't end with a court's gavel in Managua. It continues in the legacy of a life cut short, in the warnings left unheeded, and in the painful questions that linger for her family, her friends, and the community that witnessed a modern tragedy unfold through both ancient violence and digital clues. A conviction was secured, but true justice for a stolen life is impossible. What remains is memory and the urgent lessons learned too late. Haley's story is more than a true crime case. It's a stark examination of intimate partner violence in the digital age, of red flags ignored, and of a pursuit for accountability that stretched farther than anyone could have imagined. What is the true legacy of Haley Anderson? The story of Haley Anderson is defined by two powerful forces: profound loss and enduring legacy. The loss is immeasurable: a vibrant young woman with a giving heart, whose potential to heal others was violently erased. Her family's grief is a permanent shadow. But from that darkness, a powerful legacy of awareness has grown. Haley's case became a national conversation starter about intimate partner violence on college campuses. That prior incident, the slashed tires in 2017, stands as a heartbreaking example of a red flag that, while noted, didn't trigger the intervention that might have saved her life. Her story is now used by advocates to emphasize threats, controlling behavior, and acts of jealousy are not minor arguments. They are potential precursors to tragedy. Her case also lives on in the strange intersection of technology and tragedy. The very app that led her friends to her body symbolizes our modern connectedness, but also a sobering truth. No digital tool can replace human intuition and the courage to act when someone you love shows signs of danger. Haley's friends used that tool with devastating effectiveness, highlighting both the power and the limits of the digital age in matters of the heart. Orlando Tercero sits in a Nicaraguan prison. convicted under a foreign law for an American crime. But Haley Anderson is remembered for so much more than her death. She is remembered for her smile, her ambition to be a nurse, and the love she gave to her family and friends. Her legacy is an urgent plea to all of us, to see the warning signs in the relationships around us, to take threats seriously, and to protect the lights in each other's lives, because once extinguished, they can never be fully relit. If this documentary resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into impactful true crime. Your thoughts on the case are welcome in the comments.